Jim, the NATO military leaders meet today to discuss what kind of security guarantees they could give to Ukraine. There are going to be some fairly major sticking points, aren't they? Because what seems to be clear from President Trump, and I'm sure President Putin, that Ukraine cannot be part of NATO. So what guarantees can NATO provide to Ukraine?
Well, I can give you some ideas on that, but I think one thing that bothers me is that I haven't heard that Putin has given really a concession to Zelensky and to President Trump that he is going to agree to have a security guarantee that involves troops in Ukraine at all. And so so to get right to your question, the European leaders who've come together with the coalition of the willing, they're going to have to decide, what does this force actually do? Does it fight the Russians if they come across the border? Are they big enough and strong enough to do that? Or are they going to be just a small number, 30 of them or 300 of them, with their job being just to monitor? And if the Russians do something, they go home. They don't sit there and fight. And what's the state of the Ukrainian military in Ukraine? Are they going to be part of this? Are they going to be a strong military? Or is Putin going to say, no, 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 I want a neutral Ukraine and I don't want them to have a big military? So the NATO leaders, as you point out, the military leaders who may be getting together and coming up with what kind of security guarantee they're going to provide, they can't really answer that question because they don't know what Putin is really going to agree to allow. And it's so I think there's been a lot of optimism, and there's been a lot of feeling that we've really made some progress in terms of certainly the security guarantee. But I'm starting to think that maybe we're not, because we haven't really heard anything from Putin. So we could have lots of meetings, but I'm not sure until we get what Putin's layout is for a security guarantee that he would agree to. These discussions aren't going to really mean anything.
What will NATO do in the event that Vladimir Putin says, as he has in the past, I will not allow there to be any European peacekeeping troops in Ukraine? What next for NATO then?
Well, Zelensky for sure will not accept a security guarantee that does not involve European boots on the ground. They don't have to be under a NATO flag. They can be under their own national flag, but he wants a military force in Ukraine to help the Ukrainian military if there's a third attack by Russia. So I think that it's going to be a problem where NATO's not going to have a ready solution. They could say, well, we'll have, the European coalition of the willing will be based in Germany, or in Poland, and then that's not going to work. So I think for Zelensky, who does not want another Budapest memorandum, which is something on paper in terms of a security guarantee, but nothing in reality. That's what was torn apart by the Russians. He's saying, look, this time around, you guys have got to be here already. It's not a case of us, of Zelensky, Ukraine taking your word for it that you're going to be there. You need to be here.
And therefore we have a problem, don't we? Without having that meeting yet between Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Zelensky, how do you imagine they will make progress on this obvious issue that Putin doesn't want troops in Ukraine and Zelensky saying, I need them there?
Well, I think this is something, if Putin comes out publicly, I've heard some of his people say this, that he hasn't changed his mind, really, about having any kind of security guarantee that have boots on the ground. So if in fact that's his position, they're going to have to go back and Trump himself, whether he's going to do it through putting sanctions on Putin or whatever it is, they're going to have to get something from Putin that says he will accept a security guarantee in the form of coalition of the willing troops in Ukraine. Then he'll say, well, I'll allow the troops, but they can't be armed, or they can't have a rules of engagement that mean attacking. I mean, this is going to be still a lot of negotiation before they're going to really agree to a security guarantee. And again, this goes back to my point. There's been a lot of optimism out there and a lot of statements over the past couple of days that this has been a great breakthrough. I'm just not confident that it is what we think it is until we hear from Putin.
Donald Trump actually seems to be echoing some of the things that Putin had been demanding. He said the idea of Ukraine joining NATO was insulting. He then said Ukraine was, I'm quoting here, a buffer between Russia and the rest of Europe. I mean, this is the first interview he gave post that summit. I mean, that suggests actually he's got warmer intentions to what Putin is asking for any kind of ceasefire and peace deal.
Well, that's a really interesting point because I heard him say when they were at the White House before they went to the Oval Office, but they were sitting around a table, and Trump kicked off the meeting with the European members and Zelensky there, and he said, "I understand now that Ukraine is the front line for European security." Or worse to that effect. He said front line, that Ukraine is the front line, and therefore he understands why Europe is so concerned about what's going to happen with Ukraine, because that's their front line. So it's interesting that if he is talking about Ukraine as a buffer state, then that means it could be neutral. It could be something that is not going to have a major military in it in terms of Ukraine. That he's not going to allow Ukraine to have much of a military. It's almost like Germany after World War One under the Versailles Treaty, where the Germans were limited in terms of what their military looked like. And so, if that's what Putin has in mind, and that Trump has agreed, well, that's not going to be a host of a security guarantee force at all. If they're just a buffer, but if they're the front line, and Trump says to Putin, "Look, the Europeans say this is their front line. Therefore, the security guarantee means something to them, and that means forces in Ukraine." Then that's the setup. That's the setup for Ukraine if they're considered the front line. So, which is it, Trump? Do you consider them a front line, or are they a buffer state, a neutral buffer state? We don't know that either. So you can see how hard it is for the NATO, whether it's NATO military authorities or the coalition military authorities, talking about the security guarantee force. They don't know what the mission of this force is going to be, or if they're even going to be in Ukraine. So how can they have much of a discussion that goes anywhere when there's so many unknowns?
Even the subject of that discussion, finally, Jim, where there could be this potential meeting between Putin and Zelensky is giving us insight maybe into how serious the leaders are about peace, because Putin had suggested meet in Moscow. I mean, that can't have been a serious suggestion that he thought Zelensky would say, oh, yes, sure. I mean, I'll get the next flight over.
Well, I also heard that it might be in Budapest, the home of Orban, a big pal and friend of Putin. So how is that as far as a neutral place to meet? But I think, your point though is important. When Putin and Trump were talking about the next meeting at that press conference, and Putin blurted out, "Well, look, the next meeting can be in Moscow." To me, it was like a bilateral visit by Trump to Moscow to celebrate the end of the war, or that it was really something that where Putin wanted to host Trump. He wanted to give Trump a red carpet and a flyover and all the things that Trump gave to Putin there in Alaska. It didn't seem to me that was what he had in mind was to have the meeting in Moscow. Maybe it was, I don't know, but for sure that couldn't be serious. But on the point of a meeting though, there's got to be a lot more work done before you have another meeting, I think. We had the Alaska meeting. We've got a lot of vagueness coming out of there. I think we're going to see over time that there's not the agreement that it sounded like coming out of Alaska, whether it's a security guarantee or whatever it might be, that really we're going to find that Putin hasn't changed his mind, and that there's going to have to be a lot more work done at the ambassadorial level, at the expert level, not between Putin and Trump or the three with Zelensky in there. There's going to have to be some negotiating and a piece of paper and a framework agreed before these leaders meet, because having them sit around the table without a piece of paper or without a negotiated position or agreement on something, that gives you nothing. And so there's got to be some work done before they meet, whether it's in Moscow or it's in Budapest or wherever.
Jim, thank you so much. It's been brilliant to have you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.